So a modern surveillance society, if you were to go back 20 years or possibly less and you were to think about surveillance, you'd be thinking about this guy, the state monitoring your every move, invading your privacy. Actually, if we look at the environment we operate in now, private companies are probably holding more data about us, tracking us more closely than the state is. We certainly see the Director General of Europol saying the private sector now knows more than we do. And regulators are very much aware of this and on the case in relation to particularly some of the larger data users out there. But also we've had a great democratisation of surveillance. So as well as private companies and the state surveilling us, we're all surveilling each other. And we saw that being an issue very early on in the new data protection framework through the Linklaters decision, more recently through the Rhinus decision, which is private use of CCTV systems. Where do we cross the line between being a private user and within the domestic purposes exemption, when do we become subject to regulation? So what does this mean? Does this mean we should forget about state surveillance? It's not important anymore. We all have no privacy. As Mark Zuckerberg famously said, privacy is no longer a social norm. Well, no, I don't think any of us believe that. And state surveillance is different and important for a number of reasons. It's not optional. So we can, in theory, opt out or avoid surveillance by private companies. State surveillance is more intrusive. It can allow the state to listen in to our correspondence, and it has greater impact. And there's a great quote here from the Anderson report, which is, the state can arrest you and lock you up. The worst Google can do is show you an ad, which I think is a little bit glib, but makes the point. And it's very difficult, state surveillance. It's really difficult because you've got a real clash of interests. On the one hand, you've got fundamental rights of privacy and freedom of expression, freedom to convey information. On the other, you've got the state's duty to ensure national security, to prevent crime, to ensure health and safety. And it's doubly difficult because of additional factors we get. So states are unsurprisingly unwilling to give details of operational matters about the way they're using surveillance because it would undermine that operational matter. But many are also unwilling to give general descriptions about the surveillance that they operate. And even when they do provide that information, do we believe it? There's another telling quote from the Anderson report. So Lord Ben-Kathra, chairman of the Joint Committee on the Draft Communications Data Bill, complained after publication of some of the Snowden documents that PRISM and the alleged Tempora program were highly relevant but were not revealed to him. So even these senior parliamentarians are not necessarily being informed about the activities that are taking place. And obviously that makes it very difficult for civil society to understand and come to a position on this. We don't necessarily know what's going on. And the other is actually that a lot of this comes down to proportionality. A lot of this is, well, what's the threat and what are the steps we're taking to counter the threat? And we don't really know what the threat is. The Assistant Commissioner of the Met Police today said that 50 attacks had been foiled since the 7/7 bombing. And we know that we live in a time of heightened concern from terrorism, but actually how many threats are out there? To what extent is surveillance relevant and useful in order to prevent those attacks? We don't know that information, we won't get it, which makes this a really difficult debate to have. It's also very dynamic. People's views, the political environment changes dramatically with events. The Madrid train bombings, for example, were the precursor to the ill-fated data retention directive. Je suis Charlie, the Charlie Hebdo massacres, they were the precursor to the new French surveillance rules. So we need to make a dynamic assessment. And sometimes, actually, there's a little bit of a proxy war going on. There's a lot of talk about how, for example, US cloud providers are not safe. It's not safe to use them because of invasive US surveillance rules. And then, obviously, the US say, well, actually, Europe, you're just as bad as well. And behind it all, big differences in terms of cultural attitude. So you talk to a British person about surveillance and code breaking, and he'll think of this guy here who's a national treasure. You talk to someone who grew up... Sherlock Holmes, Alan Turing. You talk to someone who grew up in East Germany before reunification, and they'll think about the Stasi. Again, a graphic illustration of this from the Anderson report, talking about Operation Rescue, European-wide investigation into child sexual abuse. 371 suspects identified in the UK, 240 were investigated, 120 are under arrests or convictions. In Germany, because they don't retain communication in the same way, 377 suspects, only 7 could be investigated, no arrests could be made.